Hey everybody, this is Dr. Osborne, founder of Gluten Free Society, with a research alert for you today. Two questions. Number one, can gluten make you crazy? I know it sounds a little bit crazy. And number two, can gluten cause brain damage? Both being an affect that gluten can have on the brain. So let's dive into what the actual research says on the issue. Now, bread madness. So on bread madness, interestingly enough, this is a quote from Dr. Peter Green, the director of the Columbia University Celiac Disease Center in New York. This is his quote directly. He says, an emerging group of people with gluten sensitivity have such psychiatric and neurological disorders as schizophrenia, attention deficit, depression, and bipolar syndrome, and a higher rate of some antibodies. Schizophrenia used to be called bread madness. This is very, very true. Schizophrenia did used to be called bread madness, and the scientists now have linked gluten exposure to antibodies in those with schizophrenia. So here's the evidence. Here's some of the research. So this journal study done in 2017 on the left-hand side here, anti-gliadin antibodies are related to neurochemistry and schizophrenia. What these researchers found is that many people with a diagnosis of schizophrenia actually had reactions to gluten or antibody reactions to gluten and did better on a gluten-free diet. And the study over here on the right out of the journal Lancet Neurology, gluten sensitivity is a systemic autoimmune disease with diverse manifestations. The disorder is characterized by abnormal immune response to ingested gluten in genetically susceptible individuals. Celiac disease, otherwise known as gluten-sensitive neuropathy, is only one aspect of a range of possible manifestations of gluten sensitivity. Interesting, let's summarize what he's saying here. He's saying that although gluten sensitivity is a systemic autoimmune problem, only one aspect of gluten sensitivity is celiac disease. And what he goes on to say is neurological manifestations in patients with established celiac disease has been reported since 1966. So folks, this is not new information. 1966, I mean, we're talking decades ago, right? So it was not until 30 years later that in some individuals, gluten sensitivity was shown to manifest solely with neurological problems. So for the last 20 plus years, we've seen research and we've seen clinical data that shows and that confirms that gluten can cause neurological damage without causing gut damage. Very, very important, because if we're talking about gluten and asking our two questions from the beginning, one, can gluten make you crazy? Yes, it can. It can create, in some schizophrenics, it can contribute to the disease. And number two, can gluten cause brain damage? Here's some more evidence. Markers of celiac and gluten sensitivity in children with autism. The conclusion in this study was that some children with autism display increased immune reactivity to gluten, the mechanism of which appears to be distinct from that in celiac disease. So it's not the same as what we see in celiac disease. It's a different reaction. The increased antibody response is associated with gut symptoms, points to a potential mechanism involving an immune response or a leaky gut, intestinal permeability, abnormalities in affected children. So basically what this study is showing is that there's a link between gluten sensitivity creating leaky gut and triggering autistic type problems. Now what the study's not saying is that every child with autism is gluten sensitive, or that a gluten sensitive diet cures everybody with autism. This study is making the connection that some children, many kids with autism, do better on a gluten-free diet. Then we have central and peripheral nerve damage. A couple of studies here. You can see the left one published in the Reviews of Neurology, neurological manifestations of gluten sensitivity with or without gut damage, which is what enteropathy means, are also frequent. Their pathogenesis, including an immunological attack on the central and peripheral nervous tissue, accompanied by neurodegenerative changes. The clinical manifestations are varied, but the most common syndromes are cerebellar ataxia, which is a disease of damage to the brain that causes loss of balance and vertigo, and peripheral neuropathy, which is pain in the periphery. So people that develop pain syndromes in the hands and the feet, or numbness and tingling in the hands or the feet. So what this study in this review is showing is that gluten can cause both central brain damage, but also can create external damage to the peripheral nerves. So both are related in this regard. Then we have, this is very interesting, the opioid effects of gluten exorphins. There's a protein, a subclass of proteins found in gluten called gluten exorphins or gluteomorphin, and these proteins act like morphine. Now, can morphine alter the way we think and feel? Sure, it can, and this is one more aspect of how gluten can affect your mind. Gluten can affect your brain, because these substances can actually create a masking effect of inflammation and pain. And so basically, gluten opioids or gluten exorphins can damage you, but at the same time they're damaging you, can create a pain-reducing effect that masks its own toxicity, which makes you not feel it until the damage is so severe that it starts to show up. So this is a very, very unique study in that identifying these proteins within gluten that act like morphine that mask the damage that gluten does for years until the damage accumulates and becomes major. So, can gluten make you crazy? According to research, yes, it absolutely can. It's linked to schizophrenia, bipolar, ADD, ADHD-based diseases. Can gluten cause brain damage? Absolutely. According to the research, it definitely can. So, hopefully this clears the air around that area. If you are struggling with bipolar, with schizophrenia, if you're struggling with neuropathy, if you're struggling with cerebellar ataxia, if you're struggling with ADD or ADHD, what's the take-home message? Get with your doctor, ask him to test you genetically for gluten sensitivity, and if you get positive results, change your diet. It just might change and save your life. Do you want to learn more about gluten? You want to learn more about my mission? Go visit us at glutenfreesociety.org. Make sure, too, you subscribe to the channel. And once you subscribe, hit the bell to get notifications for future videos. This, again, is Dr. Osborne wishing you excellent health. We'll see you in the next video.